She hired him to fix a broken press bed and paid him in shillings, and she did not know she was paying an earl. That was the irony of it, though no one in Ashwick would have laughed even if they'd known. The man who walked through the door of Crane and Sons print shop on a Tuesday in October, with road dust on his coat and a question about the work carried more of England in his name than Ada Crane would ever stand on. He owned the bank that had purchased her debt note, though he didn't know that yet himself. He owned a house with 40 rooms and a staff that addressed him as my lord, while looking somewhere past his left ear. He had walked away from all of it. The estate, the title, the whole careful architecture of being an earl. Because a man who has spent every hour of his life being measured eventually needs to know what he weighs on his own. His name was Sewell Gray, the Earl of Foxmore. To Ada, he gave the name Sewell Gray and stopped there and let the rest of him be nothing. She took it without question. She had a press with a cracked bedplate and a guild that wouldn't lend her credit, and a whole town quietly placing bets on how long the widow's shop would last. She didn't have time to wonder why a journeyman mechanic stood so straight. Remember the shillings she counted into his palm that first evening. Remember them because everything that came after, the contract bid, the night she showed him, her ledgers the morning a gentleman's carriage rolled into Market Street, and a stranger spoke 2 words that unravelled a whole summer of trust. All of it grew out of those plain, ordinary coins. If a story like this finds you, stay with it. The lie is only half of what happened in Ashwick. The other half is what she did when she found out. 6 months she had been running the shop alone. 6 months since Thomas Crane had died of fever in the room above the press, leaving her his name, his debts, and a 16-year-old brother-in-law named Owen, who ate twice what she could afford and fixed twice what she asked. The town was kind about it. That was the part that cost her. Mrs. Howick from the drapery brought casseroles and stayed to suggest, gently, whether Ada had considered returning to her father's house in Dorset. The Printers' Guild sent a representative who called Thomas a fine craftsman and declined her application for a line of credit in the last paragraph, where it counted. Even the County Gazette, whose print contract had been the shop's steadiest income, let it be known through a solicitor's letter that they were evaluating all arrangements going into the new year. What all of it meant was this: Aldous Pemberton, who owned the other press in Ashwick and had wanted the Gazette contract for 3 years, was circling. He was patient the way wealthy men are patient when they know they don't need to hurry. Ada kept the shop running anyway. She rose before Owen and set the type by lamplight, and she was good at it. Better than Thomas had been, though she'd never said so while he lived, because her fingers knew the individual letters the way a pianist knows keys, by position and by weight. She could set 600 pieces of type in an hour without thinking, which left her mind free to run the numbers that she knew by now the way she knew the type. Not as figures, but as a feeling, low and constant, like water rising. The morning Sewell Gray walked through her door, she had 11 paying accounts where Thomas would have had 30. "I do repair work," he said. He'd waited at the threshold until she looked up, which she noted. Men who wanted work usually pushed in. "Machinery mostly. I've worked presses before." Ada looked at him the way she looked at suspect, paper stock. Tall, mid-30s. The coat was worn at the elbows but clean, and the wear had the look of deliberate economy, not genuine poverty. His hands, when she made herself notice them, did not match the coat. The palms were calloused enough, but the knuckles were unbroken, and the nails were cut square and even. She filed that away. "My press bed is cracked along the platen rail," she said. 3 mechanics have looked at it. 2 said replace the whole bed. 1 said pack the crack with cork and pray. I can't afford to replace it, and I have a contract to fill by Friday. He stepped past her to look at it without being invited, which should have annoyed her and didn't. He crouched at the side of the press and ran 2 fingers along the rail, and was quiet for a moment in the way of someone reading something. "The crack's surface only," he said. "The bed's sound. You don't need a new one. You need a fitted iron shim along the rail and a reset on the pressure arm." The last man who said something like that charged me for 4 hours and left the crack wider. "Let me do the shim while you watch. If it holds a full run, you pay me for the day. If it doesn't, I leave and you're no worse off than now." She looked at him. He looked at the press. "I don't have money for charity in either direction," she said. "The day you cost me more than you earn, you're gone. I won't apologize for it." He took off his coat, folded it over the stool, which no day labourer alive had ever done, and asked where she kept her iron stock. It was an Earl who asked it. Ada didn't know. She knew only that the knot she'd been carrying since Thomas's funeral loosened by some small fraction she couldn't account for, and that the loosening unsettled her, and that she pointed at the back room and looked away before he could see her face. He didn't leave at the end of the trial run. The shim held. She paid him for the day, and he came back the next morning and the one after that, and by the end of the first week he'd reset the pressure arm, realigned the ink rollers, and solved a timing problem in the feed mechanism that Thomas had been compensating for by hand for 2 years, without realizing it could be fixed. Owen attached himself to Sewell on day 3 with the particular velocity of a 16-year-old who has been running short of adults willing to explain things. Sewell answered every question seriously, which was all Owen ever really wanted. Gus, who had worked the crane press since before Ada was born, and who wore his scepticism the way other men wore hats, constantly and in all weather, watched from the corner for the better part of a week before he said anything. His hands were soft when he came in, Gus told her one evening, flat. "They're not soft now." No, but soft hands don't come from the kind of work he says he's done, and listen to the way he talks. Ada had listened. That was the trouble. Sewell said his words with a precision that didn't belong to a journeyman mechanic. Not showing off, not performing, just the natural carriage of a man whose education had been thorough and expensive and taken for granted. When Owen asked him a difficult question, he paused before answering the way a man pauses when he has several true answers and is choosing among them. When Ada mentioned the technical term for a cracked Platon matrix, he used the Latin root without thinking and caught it a half-second too late. She put it in the drawer with the hands and the coat. She shut the drawer because the press was running at full capacity for the first time in 8 months, and she had 40 accounts to fill by Friday. The night she told him about Pemberton's offer was the first time she'd said it aloud to anyone. He had stayed late to adjust the feed tension. He always found one more thing. And she had brought him coffee because Owen had gone to bed, and the empty shop felt less like loneliness with someone else in it. "Pemberton approached me yesterday," she said. "He wants to buy the shop, or rather, he wants to buy the press. He'd find a use for the name." She said it the way she'd heard Pemberton say it, warmly, with the implication that she should be grateful for the offer. Sewell's hands stilled on the tension screw. "He holds your debt note, doesn't he?" She looked at him. "How did you know that?" "The way you said, 'find a use,' that's the voice of a man who doesn't need to negotiate." He set down the wrench. "What happens if you don't sell?" "He can call the note. There's a clause." She stopped. "A clause that lets him demand full payment with 30 days' notice. I have a third of what he'd ask." "So he's not offering to buy. He's offering to let you choose the manner of losing." She hadn't said it that clearly to herself yet, even alone. Something about hearing it plain made it easier to breathe, which was strange. And she looked at the press to avoid showing him that. "There's the Gazette contract bid in 3 weeks," she said. "Open bidding at the county offices. If I win a full year's contract, not month to month, I have the income to make the note irrelevant. Pemberton knows that. He wants the offer accepted before the bid." "Then bid," Sewell said. "My press was broken 2 weeks ago. Pemberton's been running full capacity all year. He can underbid me." "Can he outprint you?" She looked at him. "I set faster than anyone in this county," she said. "It wasn't vanity, it was arithmetic." "Then don't compete on price. Compete on quality and speed. Let the Gazette's editor watch a timed run. Your hands against Pemberton's whole floor." He had that stillness again, the one that preceded certainty. You can't buy your way into that bid, but you can be undeniably better than the alternative. She said yes before she finished the coffee. The next 2 weeks were the best of her working life, though she wouldn't have called them that while they were happening. They were exhausting and argued and entirely too late into the night. But the press ran like a clock, and the type flew, and Sewell learned the rhythm of the shop until he wasn't a mechanic in it, but a part of it. In the corners of those long days, they built the other thing, the unnamed thing, out of shared work and the specific intimacy of people who argue about the correct way to ink a roller. He had never been wanted as himself. He thought it one night in his room at the inn, turning it over the way you turn a stone to see what lives under it. He had been wanted as Foxmore, as a fortune and a title, and a solution to other people's mathematics. He had never once been wanted by someone who thought he had nothing, simply because of the way he was in a room. Ada Crane did not know he owned anything. She wanted the man who had fixed her press and answered Owen's questions, and stayed until midnight arguing about typeface spacing, and Sewell found, with a quiet that surprised him, that he would have given the earldom, the house and the title and all 40 rooms, to go on being just that man. He should have told her then. He knew it even at the time. Every day the truth waited, it grew heavier. But every day he didn't tell her was another day of being wanted simply, and he was a starved man at a table, and he couldn't push back the chair. The night she showed him the full ledgers was the night the lie put down its roots. She hadn't meant to. It was past 11, and the bid was 6 days out, and she'd been running numbers at the back table until the figures stopped being numbers and started being a sensation behind her sternum. He found her there. He didn't say anything soft or useless. He pulled out the chair across from her and said, "Show me." After a long moment she turned the ledgers around, the shop's real state in full for the first time since Thomas died. It was worse than the town knew. Thomas had borrowed against the press twice over in his last year, and Pemberton had bought both notes. The Gazette contract, even one, would service the debt but not retire it, not in the time frame Pemberton's clause allowed. The contract bid was not a solution, it was a postponement. "He's going to call the note no matter what I do," she said, when Sewell had read to the end. Her voice was flat and her eyes were steady in the particular way of someone who has already done their crying in private. "The bid buys me a year, maybe. He wants this press. He's always wanted it. I was just the obstacle." She closed the ledger. "I've never shown anyone that. I don't know why I showed you." "Because you're tired of carrying it alone," he said. "That's reason enough." And here, Sewell made the choice that cost them everything. He could have told her. The truth was right there, 3 sentences away. "I am the Earl of Foxmore. Pemberton's note is nothing to me. I'll pay it tonight and you'll never fear that man again." He held the sentences in his mouth and swallowed them, because he could see exactly what would happen if he said them. She would not take the money. She was a woman who had refused the Guild's charity and the Drapery Widow's casseroles and Pemberton's offer with her spine perfectly vertical. She would not take an earl's money from across a midnight table. And she would put him out of the shop by morning, and the plain wanting would be over, and he would become the very thing she'd spent 6 months fighting, a wealthy man with leverage. So he chose the coward's kindness. He would solve it in the dark. He would reach back into the life he'd walked away from and pay Pemberton's notes quietly, through his man of business, no name attached, and she would wake one morning to find the threat simply gone. What he said instead was the most honest thing he'd said since he walked through her door. "I've spent my whole life in rooms where everyone knew my worth to the penny, and nobody knew me at all. This is the first time I've felt like a person instead of a figure someone's calculating." He looked at her. "Whatever happens with Pemberton, I need you to know that. Being here, in this shop, with you. It's the first time I've felt real." It was the truest thing he'd said, wrapped around the largest lie he'd told, and Ada heard only the truth in it. She came around the table, and what happened after wasn't quite a decision, and wasn't quite an accident. And afterward the ledgers and Pemberton and the clock on the wall were a very long way away. That night, while she slept in the chair by the cooling stove, Sewell wrote a letter to Mr. Wick, his man of business in London, who had not heard from his employer in 4 months. Buy the Pemberton notes, both of them, quietly through an agent, no name attached. He sealed it with the wax from the desk drawer, his own seal, pressed in without thinking, the Foxmore crest stamped by sheer habit, and tucked it in his coat pocket and went up to his room almost content. He had built the trap. He had baited it with his own kindness. He did not understand what he'd done until it was too late to undo it. The bid was held on a clear November morning, open to the public as county business required. The Gazette's editor, a dry, precise man named Farley, had agreed to Sewell's suggestion of a timed demonstration. Both shops would set and pull a 200-word passage in real time. The town came because Ashwick understood a competition, and because the widow Crane had been quietly failing for 6 months, and quietly not failing for the last 3 weeks, and people wanted to know which version was real. Ada set the passage in 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Pemberton's senior compositor with 2 assistants took 17. The quality wasn't close. Farley gave her the contract in the street, in front of the Guild Reeve and the courthouse steps and all of Ashwick, and the sound the crowd made was the specific sound of a town revising its opinion of a woman it had been patient with. Ada stood in the November sun with ink on her cuffs and Owen's arm around her shoulders, and felt, for the first time since Thomas's funeral, that the ground under her feet was level. It was also the day 3 things were planted that would come up later as a harvest of grief. The first, Pemberton. He stood at the edge of the crowd and he was all warmth and congratulation, and he shook her hand and told her she was remarkable, and all the while his eyes were doing arithmetic. He said in that pleasant voice of his that he looked forward to reviewing the note arrangement given the shop's evident revival. He used that word, revival, and let it sit. The second, a figure at the back of the crowd that Sewell had gone very still to see. A man, well-dressed, passing through on the West Road, who had no reason to be at a county print bid. Sewell turned his face away, made himself part of the crowd on Ada's other side, her body between himself and the man's line of sight. The well-dressed man squinted, started to rise from the bench he'd taken, and then the crowd shifted, and the moment passed and Sewell breathed again. Ada saw it. She didn't understand it. She put it in the drawer with the hands and the coat and the Latin term. The third thing, they danced at the celebration that evening. Owen pulled Ada onto the floor, and Sewell followed with that dry look that meant he was daring her to refuse. And she didn't refuse because she couldn't, in front of the whole town, be seen to be afraid of a simple reel. It was clumsy at first and laughing, 2 tired people being ridiculous on a good evening. And then the music changed to something stately, and for the space of 10 or 12 bars, Sewell forgot himself. Not in the steps, but in the lead. He turned her with a certainty she felt in her shoulder and her spine, the exact certainty of a man who has danced in rooms she had never seen, who knew without thinking where her weight was and where it would be next. For those 12 bars she was dancing with someone she did not know. She looked up. He saw her looking. He stumbled on purpose, laughed it off, made a joke of his own feet, but the thing had already been shown. They walked home late along the quiet street, the celebration behind them. "I don't know who you were before Ashwick," she said. She kept her eyes ahead. It cost her something to say, and she said it plainly, the way she said everything. "A man doesn't talk like you talk, or go still the way you went still this afternoon. Without a before that, he's locked away. I'm not asking you to open it." She stopped, made herself finish it. "But whatever it is, don't make me regret not asking. That's all. Don't make it the thing I should have pressed you on." He looked at the street for a moment. "There's nothing back there worth your regret," he said. "Exactly what you hired." She believed him because she wanted to. They walked on. 3 weeks later, Pemberton called the note. He did it by post, under a solicitor's seal, citing the early call clause, the one Thomas had signed in a desperate year. Full payment within 30 days. The amount was 3 times what the Gazette contract would earn her in the year ahead. Sewell read the letter over her shoulder in the yard. "I'll find the money," he said. He said it too quickly. He said it the way a man says a thing he already knows how to do, and Ada turned on him with a month of good feeling looking for somewhere to land. "You'll find it," she said. "A travelling mechanic with a rented room. You'll find this sum in 30 days for a shop that has been bleeding for a year." Her voice was steady and terrible. "How?" He had no answer that wasn't the truth, and the truth he would not give her. Not here. Not with Gus in the doorway, and Owen gone pale by the back wall. "Trust me," he said, 3 days. The pause where the truth should have been opened something between them, a hairline crack she couldn't have named, but felt. It widened that same evening. Gus found her in the composing room. "I'll say this once because I worked for your husband's father, and I won't watch you go under without saying it." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Your Mr. Gray has been at the post office twice this week. I saw him seal a letter yesterday in the doorway where the light was good." The wax was stamped. Not a common seal. A proper crest. Working men don't have crests. The drawer opened. Everything she had stored there came out at once. The hands, the coat, the Latin, the dancing, the stillness at the crowd, the "I'll find the money said too fast," the crest. Each thing she had explained away on its own. Together they made a shape, and she did not yet know the shape's name, but she knew it was a lie, and she knew she had built a season of herself on top of it. She confronted him that night in the shop, with one lamp between them. "Gus saw the seal," she said. "Tell me what you are." He said nothing for a long moment. She watched the truth come all the way up to the surface of him, and then again go down. "Give me 3 days," he said. 3 days and the note will be gone, and you'll have this shop free and clear, and then I'll tell you everything. 3 days, Ada." She should have thrown him out. Every practical instinct she owned told her to send him down the street and face Pemberton alone with her eyes open. She gave him the 3 days. She did it because she loved him. She let herself use the word once, in the silence after, and hated how true it felt, and love does the dangerous thing. It trusts the specific person who is specifically lying, on the strength of a feeling against all judgment. That is the trust the next morning broke. Remember that it was trust freely given, against her own sense, because she loved him, not merely the lie, that the reveal destroyed. She got 2 of the 3 days. The carriage came on the morning of the 3rd, while the shop was open and Market Street was busy, and Owen had the press running full speed on a Gazette order. Ada was behind the counter when she heard the horses. She knew before she turned. She had learned by then to know his kind of stillness. The carriage was black and lacquered, with a coat of arms on the panel that flashed in the pale winter sun. It had no business on Market Street in Ashwick, and the whole street seemed to understand that, going quiet by instinct as it rolled to a stop. A footman set the step, and out came a man in a coat that cost more than the press, who looked at the print shop with the expression of someone reading a sign in a language they find quaint. He found Sewell in the doorway and smiled. "There you are," he said into the silence, pitching it to Carrie. "Good God, Sewell, this has gone on long enough. Your solicitor is beside himself. The estate accounts are a shambles. I have spent 3 months and a considerable sum chasing you across the south of England." He raised his voice for the street's benefit, clearly savouring it. "Do come home, Foxmore." The name went through Ada like cold water through a crack. She turned to look at Sewell, to share the strangeness of it, to ask who this man was, and she saw his face, and she understood everything at once in a single falling drop, before a word of explanation had been given. He was looking at her, not at the man in the expensive coat, at her. "His name," the newcomer went on, luxuriating in the audience he'd collected, "is Sewell Gray, the Earl of Foxmore. He is my cousin, and he is worth, I should think, more than this whole market town combined." He looked around with polished, practised amusement. "Has he been working for you?" "Oh, I do hope he's been useful. A peer of the realm at a type case." He laughed. "Have you been paying him dues?" Ada stood behind her counter with ink on her hands and felt the street's eyes move from the carriage to Sewell to her. She heard before the cousin said it, what he would say next. "Though I must say," he continued, looking at her now, measuring her with one brief comprehensive glance and finding her lacking, "A printer's widow, Sewell. You do have a gift for the sentimental. Still, it hardly matters. He's expected in London. There's a suitable arrangement nearly concluded. A Viscount's daughter, excellent estate, all but settled." He offered Ada something that was not quite a smile. "You'll forgive us, my dear. He was never really yours to keep." There it was. Every kind thing Sewell had ever done stood in front of her wearing a different face. The press he'd fixed with her hands too smooth for the work. The ledgers she'd opened at midnight. The letter with the crest. "I'll find the money," said Too Fast. All of it reprised in the space of a minute, into the story of a wealthy man, taking a holiday from his life and warming himself at a working woman's expense on the way through. And the 3 days. The 3 days she'd given him against everything she knew. She did not cry. She would have taken her right hand off at the wrist before she cried in that street. She set down the type block she'd been holding. She wiped her hands on her apron, one, then the other, slowly. "Sewell," she said, "not his title, his name. Is your name Dre? Yes or no?" He was looking at her. His face was open in a way she had never seen it, every careful layer gone. "Yes," he said. "And you're the Earl of Foxmore." A pause. "Yes." "And the sealed letters were to your man of business, about Pemberton's note." "Yes." "Then you have a carriage and a cousin and a suitable arrangement waiting." She looked past him to the street, to Pemberton standing at the edge of the crowd with something lit up in his face. "There is nothing for you here, my lord, but ink and shillings, and I think we both know now that you were only ever passing through both. Get off my property. Don't come back to Ashwick. If you ever cared for one true thing in this shop, you'll do me the kindness of going now." His voice, when he finally spoke, was low enough that only she could hear it. "You're owed the truth, and you'll have it. Not now, not like this, with him enjoying it and the whole street watching. You don't deserve to have it this way, but you'll get it, and not one word of it will be what he just said." He looked at the cousin once, with a cold that made the well-dressed man's smile slip half an inch. "I'm going because she asked me to, mark that, not because you came." He picked up his coat from the hook, folded as always, and walked past the lacquered carriage without getting in, and went down Market Street on foot, the way he'd come, a man with a knapsack and a borrowed name, leaving a title behind him on the cobblestones. Ada went back to the press. The Gazette order wasn't going to print itself. 3 weeks. The coldest working weeks of her life, though the weather had nothing to do with it. She set type and ran the press and managed Owen, who was furious in the particular inarticulate way of 16. The town repriced everything, first her judgment, then her ambitions, then her grief. She let them talk. She didn't have the hours. There was a letter he'd left with Gus. A plain wax seal, no crest, as though even in leaving he'd tried to come to her as the man and not the title. It sat on the mantel unread for 2 weeks. On the worst night she took it down, held it over the fire, and let it go before she could stop herself. She sat on the floor in the dark and wept, because she would never know what it said, and regretting it did not bring it back. Owen found her there. He sat down on the floor beside her, 16 and out of his depth and trying anyway, and stared at the grate for a while. "Why would an Earl reset a pressure arm?" he said to the fire. "If he was playing at poverty, you don't spend 3 months learning every fault in a press. You'll never have to run again. That's not what rich men do for amusement." He picked at the floorboard. "He taught me the whole feed mechanism. Not showed off, taught me, like it mattered whether I understood it or not. Why does a man do that for someone who means nothing to him?" She had no answer that didn't hurt to speak. She held her brother instead, and the question stayed with her like a stone she couldn't find a place to set down. Then 2 things happened in the same week that took her cold, settled grief and made it something alive and confused again. The first, Pemberton, 11 days from the note deadline, received full payment, paid in coin, paid in full, paid through a London solicitor whose client was not disclosed, both notes, retired completely. The shop was hers, clean in law, free of debt. She felt sick instead of free. She knew exactly who had the reach and the money for that. And what rose in her was not gratitude but fury. He thought he could pay off the debt and pay off her in the same transaction. She was a figure in someone else's ledger again, settled like an account. The second thing came 2 days later on foot. A small, fierce woman of 60 in good plain travelling clothes, who marched through the shop door, looked Ada up and down with the Earls' exact grey eyes, and said, "So you're the printer who threw my nephew out. Good. I'd have thought less of you if you hadn't. Put the kettle on, girl. My feet are done, and you need to hear something you won't enjoy." Her name was Lucinda, Sewell's father's sister. She drank her tea and looked at Ada over the rim with a gaze that catalogued everything. "My nephew's cousin told you, Sewell paid your debt to buy back your good opinion," she said. "The way, Felix tells it, it was a rich man's apology coin, a way to own you by a different method. Now you listen, because I rode 2 days to say this once. Sewell instructed his man of business to buy Pemberton's notes, weeks before Felix ever came to Ashwick. Weeks, while you still thought him nobody, before there was any lie to correct, because you didn't yet know there was one. He did it in secret, expecting you would never know it was him, expecting nothing in return. No thanks, no forgiveness, nothing. He was trying to remove a threat and disappear from the doing of it. The dates are in Mr. Wick's ledger. You may see them yourself. She set down the cup. He has also refused the Viscount's daughter, refused Felix's entire arrangement, flat after he left here, said he'd lose the estate, every acre of it, before he married to order. He has gone back to Foxmoor to face the accounts alone, rather than save himself by a marriage he doesn't want, and rather, I'll add, than drag you into a duke's scandal you never asked for. Lucinda's voice was not gentle, but it was exact. That is not a man who was using you, Ada. That is a man who loved you so badly and so clumsily that he lied to hold on to it, and lost it for the lying, and has gone home to deal with the consequences in silence rather than cost you anything more. The lie was a coward's kindness. It was never a cruelty. You are intelligent enough to know the difference. Ada sat with the tea she'd forgotten to drink, and felt the whole shape of the past months turn over in her mind, like a block of type that had been set in backwards. "It doesn't change what I am," she said finally. Her voice was steady and sure, and full of the old practical fear that had kept her upright since Thomas died, even if every word of that is true. "I'm a printer. I have ink under my nails and a brother to raise, and a press that needs me every day it runs. I won't be kept in the country between visits. I won't be an Earl's charity dressed up as a marriage. I won't go to a house with 40 rooms and be looked at the way that cousin looked at me." She stood and gathered the cups. "I would rather lose him than lose myself, and I've already lost him. So I'll thank you for the truth. I'll keep my shop, and I'll stay exactly where I belong." Lucinda looked at her a long moment, and something very close to approval moved in her face. "You're not wrong to want it on your own terms," she said, rising for her stick. "I won't argue you out of your pride. I have far too much of my own." She paused at the door. "But I'll tell you this for free. The two of you are each waiting for the other to come and give ground. He won't ask you to be a countess. You won't go to him and be made small. So you'll each keep your pride and lose the rest of it, and be very correct and very alone, until something comes along large enough to knock you both sideways at once." She put on her hat. "In my experience, something always does. Mind that press of yours. I'm told old ink presses run hot." She went down Market Street, and Ada stood in the doorway watching her go, and did not yet know that Lucinda had, without meaning to, named the very thing that was coming. The fire started in the ink store 3 nights later. It was Owen who smelled it first and raised the alarm, and by the time Ada was down the stairs, the back room was burning, and the press itself was in the path of it. The Ashwick Bucket Brigade came, the whole of Market Street, it seemed, woken by Owen's shouting. And they were fast and they were brave. But Ada knew as she stood in the street watching the smoke pour out that they were going to lose the machine. A press is ink and oil and wood. It does not forgive fire. She was still running those mathematics, cold and absolute, when Sewell came up Market Street on foot. He had ridden from Foxmoor the hour his express letter arrived, a day and a half's ride, and he looked it. No carriage, no footman, his good coat ruined already from the road. He came around the corner and took in the smoke and the bucket line and Ada's face and went straight for the door without slowing. "Don't," she said. "The feed reservoir is oil-packed," he said. He was already reading the angles of the fire the same way he had once read the crack in her press bed. "If it catches, the whole block goes with it. I know where the reservoir drain is. I can get to it." Sewell. He went in. Owen caught Ada's arm before she could follow. He was inside for 4 minutes. They were the longest 4 minutes of her life. And she spent them absolutely still, which was the only thing she knew how to do when the mathematics were out of her hands. He came out carrying the reservoir cap, which he'd detached and sealed, and coughing hard, and the front of his coat was scorched through and would never recover. The press survived. The left ink roller was damaged. The bed and the mechanisms were whole. They stood on the street together in the way of people who have just done a hard thing and haven't had time yet to feel it. He coughed again, and she hit him on the back, which was not affection but felt like it. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "Yes, I did." His voice was rough with smoke. "The moment the letter reached me, I was on a horse. I would have come if you'd told Owen to meet me at the county line with a loaded pistol." She looked at him, at the scorched coat and the smoke-dark face, and the hands that had first reset her press in October and just now pulled the reservoir from a fire. "You said there were 3 things," she said, "when you were ready to tell me everything. 3 things." He did not reach for her. That mattered. "Then I'm saying them, not as an Earl, as the man who has been standing in your shop for 4 months. He was quiet for a moment. "I left Foxmoor because I'd been an Earl since I was 22 and a man to nobody, not once, not in all those years. I wanted to know whether there was anything in me worth wanting on its own. That's the first thing, and it's vanity, and I'm not proud of it." He looked at his hands. "I tried to buy Pemberton's notes weeks before Felix came to Ashwick, before there was anything to repair between us, because I could not watch that man take your press, and because I knew you'd never accept it with my name on it. I meant for you never to know it was me. That's the second thing, and it was cowardice dressed as kindness, and it cost us everything I cared about, and I would undo it if I could." The street was very quiet around them. "The third thing is the only one that matters." His voice went low. "I refused the arrangement, refused it flat, to Felix's face, before he came here, not because of you, and also completely because of you. There is no one settled elsewhere. There won't be. I lied about my name. I never once lied about a single thing that happened in your shop. Not 1 hour of it. The name was false. Everything underneath it was true." Ada stood in the cold, dark street with smoke in her hair and looked at the man who had ridden a day and a half through the night to pull a reservoir cap out of a fire, because it was the only thing he knew how to do when something she had built was in danger. She did not forgive him because he was an Earl. Hold on to that, because it is the entire point of the thing. She forgave him because he had come back with nothing in his hands but himself, and gone straight for the bar. "My terms," she said, and her voice was the one she used for everything true, flat and level and absolute. "They aren't adjustable. I won't be kept in the country between seasons. I won't be a charity case with a ring. I won't leave this shop for a house I didn't build. My name stays on that door. I run the press and I keep the accounts, and I am nobody's rescued thing." She looked at him straight. "You'll have me as a partner, equal say, equal standing, on the level you found me on. Or you won't have me at all, my lord, and I mean it exactly the way I meant get off my property, all the way down." "On the level I found you on," he said. There was something in his voice she hadn't heard there before. Not relief exactly, recognition. "Yes, that is the only level I have ever been real on." She kissed him, or he kissed her, and afterward neither of them was entirely sure which had moved first, and it didn't matter at all, because for once in both their lives it was precisely equal. The rest of it settled in the daylight, the way real things do. Pemberton's early call clause was not the only one in his notes, as Mr. Wick discovered when he pulled the full thread of it. There was a pattern, the same clause, in 7 separate debt arrangements across Ashwick and the neighbouring townships, leveraged against working people in their worst years. It went to the county magistrate. And then, because the Earl of Foxmoor understood exactly how the machinery of consequence worked when he chose to use it, to the county paper as well. Pemberton's own creditors called his arrangements in one after another, and he left Ashwick a smaller man than he'd entered it, on the same road he'd so often threatened others down, with not one soul at the door to say how hard it was. Felix Rowe, having lost his matchmaking commission and most of his standing with it, went back to London and was not spoken of in polite terms by anyone who had been on Market Street that November morning. Owen was apprenticed to a shipyard foreman 2 towns along the coast, which had been his private ambition for 3 years, and came home Sundays full of rope splicing and nautical vocabulary, and taller than anyone expected. Gus, who had spotted the crest and been right and taken no particular satisfaction in it, was made foreman in name as well as fact. He complained about the new arrangement constantly and never once left. He liked the Earl eventually. he would have denied it under oath. Sewell asked her on the quay in January, before the town was awake, with low tide going out and their breath fogging in the cold. He didn't bring a ring. He'd learned better. "I'm not offering you a great house," he said. "You'd be miserable in it, and you'd be right to be. I'm offering you the thing we already have. A partnership, equal shares, equal say, your name on the door and on anything else that matters. Marry me on the only terms you ever named, as a partner, on the level I found you on, for the rest of both our lives." He paused, and the dry edge came back into his voice, the one she had known before she'd known anything else about him. "I'd kneel, but the dock's filthy, and you taught me better than to ruin a good pair of trousers for a gesture." "You learned that here," she said. "I learned everything here." She said yes plainly, the way she said everything true, and she kept every one of her terms to the letter for the rest of her life. The last image to carry out of this, the two of them on the quay in the thin January light, the tide coming back in slow and certain, the press running warm behind the shop window down the street. The name on the door said Crane, and beneath it, in a smaller and more careful hand, said and Dre. A title can be hidden in a travelling coat. A fortune can be left behind in an estate office. A man can give himself a plain name and wear it through a working season in a market town. But the way a person is in a room when they think no one is counting, the way they answer a boy's questions seriously, the way they fold a coat before doing hard work, the way they go straight for the bar, the first moment something they care about is in danger. That cannot be faked, and it cannot be bought, and in the long account of any life, it outweighs every acre, and every title, and every room in any house. She hired him for shillings. He was worth a county, and the only wealth either of them ever found that was truly theirs was the one they built with their own hands, equal and plain, in the press-warm shop where neither rank nor ruin could reach it. If this story moved you, do the one free thing that keeps stories like it coming. Subscribe and leave us a comment. Tell us this: was Sewell's silence a coward's kindness or a coward's cruelty? And would you have given him the 3 days or sent him down the street the night Gus told you about the seal? And while you're at it, tell us where in the world you're listening from. We love to know. Until next time, mind the fire, and pay attention to the people who do the work before anyone's watching.